Okay.
Yeah, I'm recording now. So
Great. Hello, everyone. Delighted that you're able to join us today for another Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth webinar. I want to point out that a recorded version of this webinar will be available shortly after the end of this broadcast. We are delighted to have with us today a hugely successful businessman in Andrew Pilley. He is the current chairman and owner of English Football League One club Fleetwood Town, as well as being the chairman of the independent commercial utility group BES Utilities and managing director of Commercial Power, as well as Card Saver, the Leisure Channel, and many others. He's also been an avid supporter for our organization. So Andy, thank you for joining us today. And I'd like to kick things off with just understanding how you and your businesses have been coping in the last few months in this unique year.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the forum tonight. I'm hugely honoured. I really am. Clearly, a very, very difficult year, business-wise. Times like no other time that we have experienced in our lives, and for best parts of 100 years, I'm sure we've had a range of challenges. My businesses are quite diverse, so they're all somewhat different, really, and the challenges that we faced have varied, but nonetheless, I must say that they all bear their own scar or wound from COVID, which sadly is somewhat ongoing right now. I think during the COVID pandemic, our first priority has always been the welfare of the staff and the priority of the staff. I think we have an obligation to ensure that everybody is firstly safe, and that the families of our staff are also as safe as they can possibly be during this very, very difficult time, and that protecting our people and their loved ones is always at the forefront of our minds. Redeploying our staff when the first lockdown commenced was a real challenge for us also, because in it straight away we have to find a way of working from home. This is alien to us, and we're used to the office environment whereby internal communication is so much more straightforward. It's easier to walk over to somebody's desk than what it is to communicate via Zoom and Teams. I think it's fair to say that Zoom and Teams have become very much part of everyday life nowadays. It's going back to February, January of this year. I'd heard of it, but I was far from familiar with the process. It's just 3, 4, 5 different Zoom and Teams meetings every day nowadays. So change the way that we live our lives. I mean, my energy business, first and foremost, the problems we encountered there was the vast majority of the businesses that we supply closed down during the lockdown. That gave us a surplus of energy. And sadly, if you have a surplus, you have to resell. And what tends to happen is when there's a surplus, the price that you are reselling for tends to be very low. And so we ended up having to sell for far less than what we purchased for, which inevitably causes losses for the business. We didn't encounter as much bad debt as what we anticipated we might. We were concerned that people would just not pay their bills and would just go into a hibernation stage and just keep whatever they've got. I think there was a real degree of decency, and almost we're all in this together with the vast majority of our customers, and anybody who could pay seemed to pay. Though it was very important that ourselves as a company, we build people correctly. If people are closed, we want to reflect that in the bills that we're sending out, because I'm sure we're all the same, that if I get an invoice for a bill which I think is incorrect, then I won't pay that bill. I'll say, no, that needs to be resolved. It needs to be put right, and then we'll pay it. So there was a real campaign on getting bills right, and the bad debt we incurred was no different to what we normally do. So that was pleasing. The furlough, of course, helped enormously, because without that, I don't know if some of my businesses would still be in play now. it gave us the ability to stand some people down in these difficult times, and to still be able to pay them and to keep our head above water. So that was great. There was personal challenges for myself, in as much as my mother contracted COVID. She was particularly ill. She was in intensive care. So that made it feel very real for me. When you've got somebody as close to you as your mother, who you're concerned that is she going to come out the other end of this illness. Thankfully, she pulled through. And as I say, personally, I contracted the illness back in March. It felt like a bad flu for me. My son did. My sister did. It feels like there's been quite a lot of it around, really, where I live. And maybe it's because we've had the benefit of quite a lot of tests. We have, through the core business, we've tested the vast majority of our staff, and also through the football club, we've managed to test a lot of our football staff also. Obviously, as I say, I mentioned before the furlough scheme, and I appreciated enormously the various schemes that were rolled out by the Treasury. And one of the biggest disappointments for me personally as a businessman was it felt like, for me anyway, that my businesses, we could not benefit particularly from the CBILS scheme. It felt like we kind of fell in between the cracks of that scheme. It felt like the smaller businesses managed to secure some funding. The larger businesses did, but as a medium business, it was left to our banks to draw their own interpretation as to whether we qualified. I was particularly disappointed with the response that I received from my bank, and that was that it was defined as it being extremely probable that we would not qualify, which I find quite bizarre, given that we were incorporated back in 2002 and we've turned a good profit for the last 18 years, and equally that we employ so many people in what is quite a deprived part of the UK. So that was somewhat disappointing. And had it not been for the intervention, we had a chap was Kevin Holliday, who is actually the chair of Fair Business Banking, who actually I managed to contact, and I like to praise him. He was really helpful. He jumped on the back of some of the communication we're having with the bank, and did all he possibly could to help. But obviously, he's not going to be able to do that with all the businesses that also require funding. So, without careful handling, COVID really would have been catastrophic for myself and my business. There's no handbook to maneuver your way through times like this. And I think the biggest challenge really for me is, normally in a crisis, you develop a plan. And with a plan, what will happen is you will you'll kind of say, right, this is going to happen for so long, and then we're going to come out the other end. But it felt like we had to try and look into the future and anticipate when the lockdown was going to end. And of course, nobody knew, because it was unprecedented times. And the longer it went on for, I think businesses did evolve a little bit. They became a little bit more creative. Perhaps restaurants became takeaways. More people started to trade online and perhaps from home. And gradually, thankfully, we came out of it. But then sadly, we've gone back in. Hopefully, this is only a temporary situation, and we can get back to some degree of normality in the very near time. The football club, very different. We lost all of our revenue streams, and perhaps I can come on to that later. That's equally different challenges, but nonetheless very, very difficult times.
It's the fact that so many people have been contracted by the virus just shows how real it really is, and obviously our thoughts and prayers with your family and your mother, and hopefully now that you've contracted it, that you almost have the antibodies to sort of deal with the virus going forward. And that kind of leads me on to my next sort of question. With COVID-19, hopefully the restrictions, or they start to come to a bit of an end in December the 2nd. What challenges do you really envisage for the next, let's say, 12 months, 24 months for a lot of your businesses, generally speaking?
I think the biggest challenge that my business is, and I think every business has, Sunil, is that it's working capital, because we've all been decimated by the virus in some way. It's cost everybody. The economy is a money go round, as we all know, and it's meant that with shops being closed, it's prevented money being passed from one business to another, to another, to another. And again, the Treasury has helped with the deferral of HMRC payments, VAT, pay as you earn, etc. However, we didn't anticipate lockdown 2. I think that it's my expectation, really, because I trust and I believe in the Conservative Party, the Conservative government, that they back businesses and the creation of jobs and the development of the economy. I think there's probably going to be a need to smear and to get behind businesses and to create perhaps some longer term payment plans for the repayment of the obligations to the Crown. So I think it's about working capital. And what would be disastrous, given all the investment in furlough, in CBILS, which is underwritten by the government, and all the other fantastic, gratefully received funding that's occurred, would be to then start putting businesses to the wall because of obligations to HMRC. I think we've just got to be sensible and have payment plans. So, of course, the government gets the money, which can be then redeployed into the health service and education and all the other necessities. But we have to be understanding about business needs and keeping people in employment.
I mean, a lot of people here, I'm sure, are fascinated by your journey into becoming a successful businessman. I want to get an understanding of how it all began.
Right. Well, it all began for me, Sunil, back in 2000. I got involved in the deregulation of the energy industry, and I ended up as a sales manager, and I was in charge of training probably 30 or 40 sales guys who would make contact with business owners, and they would explain the benefits of deregulation, how people now had a choice and they could choose a provider which was best for their particular circumstances. Now, the supplier at the time, which we did the vast majority of business with, was the notorious Enron. And I'm sure you'll have heard of Enron, and there's a musical now, there's a movie, and it goes through the tale of, sadly, it was built on false accounting, big American power company that went to the wall. And the knock-on effect of that was the business I worked for also sadly went to the wall. And that ended up being my opportunity in life, really, because the 30 or 40 guys who worked at the time underneath me, they had a variety of different leads, and they had mortgages and rents to pay, and they had prospects, and they said, look, Andy, and we've got potential business. Can you negotiate a deal with a different power company, and perhaps we can do some business with you? So I got on the phone and I managed to secure a deal with 2 different power companies, and I ended up working from my box room, doing really everything I'm not very good at, which is admin, HR, finance, IT, everything I'm no good at. And I eventually secured the services of my sister, who's complements me very well, and I stuck to the strategy and the sales, and we built the business up from there. Very humble beginnings, and in about 2005 we saw, this was after really becoming quite successful as a brokerage stroke consultancy, we saw the opportunities in becoming a supplier, and we became a gas supplier in 2005, which was a brave move. We put a lot of money into that, pretty much everything we had in the world. We had to make sure failure could not be an option, fast learning curve. And in 2010, we became an electricity supplier, which was even braver, because that's very complicated and far more expensive. But again, we saw a niche in the marketplace. We saw a chance to assist business owners who the big six energy suppliers were not particularly helping, because these were new startups, or these were perhaps business movers who didn't have particularly a very good credit rating. And we developed a product which was specifically for them. And I'm proud to say that that's gone very well. We've created a successful portfolio, and we have tens of thousands of customers now, and we traded for a long time, and we have a successful, profitable portfolio, which is going from strength to strength. So that's the energy journey. Just to give you some highlights on the other businesses I became in 2004. 2004, I was invited by my bank manager at the time to become involved with Fleetwood Football Club, which at the time was a local, pretty much pub football club. We were 5 leagues below the Football League. The ground was really in a state of disrepair, and the team was okay. It was probably mid-table, and I got involved. I remember coming down and I thought, this place is really falling to bits, and it was really struggling. And I think the previous chairman had left. If I hadn't got involved, there's every chance the club would not have existed. I think the pivotal moment for me was they tried to close the deal in the social club after the game. And I went in, I thought, it smells really badly in here. So I opened the window, and the window fell out of my hand. So I thought, oh, I owe these guys now. I'm going to have to do something because I broke the window. So I don't know. It may have been staged. It may have been a very clever ploy, but tens of millions of pounds later, I'm still involved, and we've had remarkable success. I'm told the fastest progression in the history of English football. We've gone from 5 leagues below the Football League to knocking on the door of the Championship last year. We lost out, I would say narrowly, but it was pretty significantly, really, in the playoffs. Semi-finals, but still great to get to that level. We intend to go one step further this year, and it's something that gives me a great deal of pleasure in my life. I think football is a vehicle that you can use to engage with similar like-minded people. There tends to be a lot of entrepreneurs, business people in sports, and it certainly opens doors. So that's a big part of my life, and it's been a magical journey going through those leagues and visiting those different grounds. And those, we kind of started with villages and progressed to towns, and now we go to cities. So it's been great fun. It really has, and it's a huge part of my life. And in 2015, I started a company called Card Saver, which is a chip and pin solutions business, and we deal with international banks. And what we do is we use the international banks gateway into MasterCard and Visa, and we provide a solution to their chip and pin requirements. We'll provide them with hardware, with software. And I think in this day and age, certainly with what we're going through now more than ever, we're edging towards a cashless society. There's so many positives with making your business cashless. All of my businesses are cashless. I practice what I preach in that respect, and it's quicker, more efficient service. You don't spend a long time putting floats together or cashing up at the end of the night. You don't have to get Securicor out. You shouldn't have to worry quite as much about getting broken into and people stealing your takings. And I think that's the direction we're heading in. And I don't like to get involved in sectors that I think are phases. I want to only get involved in sectors that I think have got real longevity and continuity. And I do think debit cards and credit cards has. I also have a utilities brokerage and aggregator business called Commercial Power. And recently, which might be quite interesting for you guys, I set up an outsourcing organization, which is a call center in Cape Town in South Africa. And that is an organization which is there to assist global entities really with whether it be incoming call requirements or outgoing sales requirements. And there's a real call centre culture out in South Africa, and the skill set that I require is there on tap. And it's been a very interesting adventure. Also, going out there, and it's very much on my to-do list to continue to build that business up.
I mean, Fleetwood Town's journey has been incredible, and I know we've got a number of people tuning in, particularly interested in Fleetwood and its progression. And one of the biggest difficulties during the first lockdown was the fact that all sports was halted. As an avid football fan myself, who regularly attends a game, it was a frustrating period, as I'm sure it was for a number of people. And I can only imagine how even more difficult it has been for the actual clubs. How did Fleetwood adjust during the first lockdown, and what would you say the current state of the club is like right now?
Well, I mean, I think there's various answers to the first question, Sunil. I mean, first and foremost, one of the biggest frustrations we had is from a sporting point of view, we felt like we were just absolutely in the zone. We'd lost 1 in 18 games, none in 12, and sometimes if you're involved in football or as a football supporter, you feel like whoever you play, you're going to beat. And we were just on that kind of, we had the momentum, we had the winning formula. I'm convinced that had the season continued, we would have been successful and achieved automatic promotion. So that was a real disappointment. We went into lockdown, and we were then faced with the dilemma: how really do we keep the players fit whilst they're not in the environment and the culture that they're familiar with at the training ground? And we had to try and do that over the internet as best we can. And so your sports scientists and your physios are watching the players run or do exercises, and this is all very, very different to what we used to. And it's my belief that, I mean, physical fitness is one thing, which is hugely important, but I also think an ingredient for success, be it in sport or be it in business, is the mindset. And if you can get your players in, and if they can be galvanized by their manager, and if he can light the room up and make the hairs in the back of their neck stand up, then you really have a chance that they will go to war for you, and they'll get over the line, they'll win you 3 points. But we weren't able to do that. So we had to bring them all back in really strange circumstances, whereby they weren't allowed to train together. There were small groups of 4, and it was all rather surreal. And with hindsight, could we have managed it better? We probably could. We felt like we didn't turn up when it mattered in the playoffs. So the sporting side was disappointing. Financially, it was horrendous, because we lost virtually every revenue stream that would normally be available to us. And a football club like Fleetwood, it's not just about the people who come through the turnstile. And historically, that's what it used to be. That was pretty much the only revenue stream. It was how many people are going to go through the turnstile, and maybe you'll get your secondary spend. But the lack of games meant that we had no TV money coming in, and the TV money is quite significant. We lost out on really many other revenue streams we have. The model here at Fleetwood is we have a state-of-the-art training ground. We have an extraordinary training ground, Premier League quality, and the training ground brings in various other streams of income. We've got 13 pitches here. Those pitches are rented out on a regular basis. We have a restaurant, we have offices whereby we'll get rental income under normal circumstances. We also have an international academy whereby we have students coming from all around the world who will experience being trained to be a professional athlete by our FA qualified coaches. We partner up with a fantastic local school who will also deliver an educational curriculum. So really, even if they're not going to go on and be professional football players, what we can put our name to and we can hang our hat on is that by the time they go home, they've had a fantastic experience. They'll go home as better people, and a real great opportunity in life. That came to an end as well. So every single revenue stream that we had ended as soon as the lockdown came in. So it was kind of batten down the hatches. When's this going to end? We really don't know. So going back to what I was saying before about planning, if you don't know when things are going to end, it becomes very difficult to devise a way forwards, because it's just so necessary to know that information, to have a solid plan. So very, very difficult. I think the final part of your question is where are we at now? Honestly, it's really, really tough. It really is, because I think it's well documented in the press. I've been quite vocal about it personally, as a chairman, as an owner, in the media, be it on the radio or on television, that there is an enormous hole in the requirements to run English Football League clubs in this country. A hole the size of £250 million. And it feels to me like the problem has been somewhat passed around. I think it's been disappointing the way it's been dealt with. We have now a rescue package, which is £50 million, which again is hugely gratefully received. However, there's a £30 million loan and a £20 million grant. It's my belief that that should be a grant, the entirety of it. I don't accept the argument personally that why would a big food chain help out a little sandwich shop? The businesses are absolutely connected. We develop the players, the stars of the future, and we need to have that working relationship. We developed Jamie Vardy, who went on to be sold to Leicester, who I sold to Leicester, who goes on to win Leicester the Premier League. We've got some incredible young players from the Premier League now, and we did have last season, the previous season to that. And this is a reciprocal arrangement whereby we all need each other. And the money which is actually within the game of football, we're talking billions and billions of pounds. We're looking at a £9 billion global TV fund, and I think £50 million for the infrastructure. We have to remember as well, the Premier League clubs, in my opinion, should remember where the vast majority of them came from over the last few years. They were EFL clubs, and the likelihood is there'll be EFL clubs in the future again. So they've got to be careful what they wish for, because this isn't just a case of, oh, great shame, some of the clubs are going to fall by the wayside here. The very infrastructure of the competition will fall to bits if we lose what are long-standing institutions that have represented the towns and the cities up and down the country for so many years, over 100 years in many, many cases. And the quality of life and the pride and the feel-good factor should not be underestimated. There is literally some people that the only time they'll go out of their house is to see their football family, and the employment and whatnot. I mean, if we can support the arts to the amount of money that they've been supported, I don't think it's unreasonable that football clubs should be supported also, because I think they play a really, really important part in the quality of life of so many people up and down the country. That's my belief. And my biggest frustration really is that it's felt like the problem has been passed around like somewhat of a hot potato. And what I think should have happened is the key stakeholders should have been put in a room, locked in the room if need be, right? And saying, guys, sort this out. Find a way to keep these football clubs afloat, because they're important. What we've got in this country that is the envy of the rest of the world, and we should keep it going, whether it's the Premier League, whether it's a holiday on pay-as-you-earn, whether it is the PFA have not been particularly helpful at all either. I think all we've heard from them is how a salary cap is wrong, and how they should challenge that through the courts. But we have to make football sustainable again. Football desperately needs a redistribution of money, because we have to make football sustainable, and that can be easily achieved with a tweaking of the distribution and making sure that we all live within our means.
You talked a bit about the Premier League there, and almost not quite understanding some of the issues the EFL are facing, or just plain right in some regards being a bit selfish. Do you think that? Do you think one of the reasons is maybe a lack of knowledge, or because I think one of the big differences when you look at what makes our country so incredible football-wise is the fact that you've got teams like Nottingham Forest in the Championship who hold 2 Champions Leagues and are a huge club, whereas you go to Italy, you go to Spain, their sort of second divisions, third divisions, fourth divisions aren't really regarded. You don't see the level of passion that you see for a League One team that you would, let's say, in a Championship equivalent in Spain. Do you think that is potentially a reason why that there's this almost disregard from maybe some of the owners in the Premiership?
I think some of the owners, as I said before, really, have got to be careful what they wish for, because if the EFL is to really suffer, it's highly likely they may find themselves in the EFL in the future, and the consequences then would be quite severe for them. I don't think it's necessary that there's vast parachute payments for clubs going down. I think if there was a smoothing of the way the payments are distributed, that would be far more sensible. And the salary cap I was hugely in favour of, because without the salary cap, there is always the danger. I've done it myself. When you win at football, it's a fantastic feeling. It really, really is. And you naturally want more of it. If the salary cap means you have a budget that you must stick to, and if that makes football sustainable, then there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think it's fantastic if we can be in a footballing world whereby the best manager, the best environment, the best sporting culture goes on to win, rather than the person who is prepared to gamble the most amount of money. Because if you gamble the most amount of money, and then if you get bored with your football club and decide that you don't want it anymore, what you find is, as we saw with Bury, as we've seen with Wigan recently, and there's many other clubs that are very, very close to the edge right now, then we find ourselves in a situation whereby the good people of that town or that city, that generations and generations and generations have gone along, and it feels like just such a hub of the local community, can all become a thing of the past. And with just some careful management and not being afraid of change, because there's nothing up with running a business to a budget, we can avoid financial disaster for the future. So I think now it's about embracing change. Project Big Picture, for example's sake, was published, and there was outcry as to how appalling it is that the big clubs have that they actually want to have a say in. They want to have the sole say, really, in the future direction of the Premier League. I don't really share the view that it was far from perfect. I fully accept that, but I don't think we should be dismissive of change, because my opinion is, it's controversial, but the reality is the reason why there's £9 billion of worldwide TV rights is because people want to watch Manchester United against Liverpool. They want to watch Chelsea against Tottenham. They want to watch the really, really big clubs. Much respect to Brighton against Burnley, but we're not going to get a £9 billion TV deal if they are the live games. It's about the bigger clubs, and equally, if we're not careful and if we do not listen to their requirements and their needs, then there is a danger of an impending European breakaway Super League, and we should be prepared to talk. The very clubs who were outraged by this motion for change are the same clubs that were proposing no relegation last season, and this is hypocrisy at its finest. And to me, I get self-interest. Football is riddled with self-interest. It really, really is. But we need to really pull the key players together, the key stakeholders, get around the table and decide on a long-term strategy for the future, which gives us the solidity and the stability which is required.
We've had a number of more football questions, which hopefully we can come back to towards the end. I want to move a bit more towards some of the sort of political questions we've had also. You made it clear last election that you would be voting Conservative. Now, a lot of people tend to shy away from their political views, especially those involved in business, and even more so if they're voting Conservative. So I want to start with, why did you vote Conservative, and how did that journey start, if you like?
Well, what I'd say first and foremost is I believe in the principles of the Conservative Party. I believe in business. I believe in job creation. I believe in encouraging entrepreneurial spirit. I think that is how we create the best quality of life for the residents of this country. I'm convinced that is what we should be focused on. And for that very reason, I've always supported the Conservative Party. However, the implications of a Labour government, in particular at the last election, were severe for the town whereby I'm the main employer. I employ close to 1,000 people in a town which has a population of 27,000 people. And for that reason, I did not want the good people of Fleetwood to sleepwalk into a situation whereby they would see their football club close, the local energy company, which employs more people than anybody else in the town of Fleetwood, close, because the Labour manifesto was to nationalise the energy sector, which would mean businesses like mine would go. The knock-on effect would be I would struggle to fund the football club to the manner which I've done historically. The football club would then certainly would not be able to compete at the level which it currently does. That would also lead to probably the loss of 200 members of staff. Now, I'm not afraid to put my head above the parapet and to make, again, the residents of Fleetwood aware of the implications as to what this means. And I could not have looked at myself in the mirror if I hadn't have explained what would happen if a Labour government had got in the last election, and the knock-on effect it would have to the people of this town. Because quite rightly, I think they would have been saying, well, Andy, you could have told us. We didn't really understand what this would mean and what this would mean for the town. I think by doing it, naturally, you end up being trolled to death on the internet. Doesn't particularly bother me that, but there are people who it does. I think that kind of behaviour is very, very poor. I'm a big boy, I can take it personally, but the levels that some of these people go to is quite deplorable, and they will start to target your businesses as well. And really, all I did there is I stated my beliefs, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that whatsoever. But sadly, there are quite extreme trolls out there who will make it the business to make your life very difficult. I think I actually even made the cartoon in The Guardian, which was quite an honour as well. But fame at last. So I just felt it was something which I had to do for the best interest of the town. It was disappointing because I think the local MP, who, regardless of which party she represents, I would have expected her to still have a working relationship with me as the largest employer in the town. Seems to have took it personal, but it wasn't personal against her. It was Mr. Corbyn's policies and my concern as to what it would mean for the people of the town where I live and where I employ a lot of people.
You touched on it there about the sort of trolling, and I did talk recently about how people nowadays are victim to horrendous trolling whenever they come out support for a political party, especially when they are senior figures like yourself. What was the kind of reaction you had when you made your support public, and what advice would you give maybe to other people who may be afraid to voice their opinion, especially as we see on social media? In the last election, there was a great sense of fear. You look at the top trending tags on your Twitters and Instagrams were all Labour and Corbyn in. Boris and Conservatives out, yet the results were, of course, Labour having their worst election results since 1935. So, what kind of advice would you say?
Well, first of all, I would say that I think what you should do is you should stand up for your beliefs and not be bullied by these people, because that's what they are. They're bullies. They attempt to intimidate people and prevent people from stating what is their belief. And I stand by my belief is not self-interest. It's in the best interest of my community and the residents of this town and the entire population of the United Kingdom. I truly, hand on heart, believe that the Conservative policies are far, far better. I think it's almost quite organised, whereby that if somebody comes out and supports the Conservative Party, the impression I got a few retweets to a couple of people. Who they are, or if they really even exist, I don't really know. But they had maybe a million followers, and next thing you're bombarded. So an awful lot of that going on. They try to target your business, which I think is really disappointing. Some of it is really below the belt. And it's my belief also that I think when people go too far, it should be deemed as a criminal offence. And I'm talking about, I mean, I had to, on one occasion several years ago, take out a civil prosecution against an individual for, I really to this day still do not know why, but this is a paradise for cowards and liars and people with their own agenda. And I think there should be new laws, and I think you should not be able to overstep the mark as some people do. And there should be a process whereby people are accountable for their actions. And if they do go too far, then there should be consequences, is my belief. I think you make a good point as well, by the way, Sunil, about if you had have read social media prior to the last election, you would have expected a Labour landslide rather than a Conservative landslide. So fake news at its finest.
I think there's not many people who disagree with you, especially when it comes to the Twitter people and the people on the platform, doing horrible things and not, being subject to sort of criminal charges. I think some of the stuff is horrendous, and it's very commendable. Someone like you, he's not necessarily directly involved in politics, and is involved in business, still has the ability to come out and say this is what you believe in, and almost just take it on chin. So. One thing that obviously you're very influential in Fleetwood and in contributing to the job market. A big question we often hear in politics is what is the future of Northern England? Many people argue it's ignored. We saw projects like the Northern Powerhouse by George Osborne receive very mixed messages and receptions. Now, you've obviously built a very successful business, whilst being up north, and you've almost a shining example there. How do you feel about Northern businesses, and how can the government help bridge the gap between them and London?
Well, I mean, the Northern Powerhouse is something. I'm really glad you brought that up, Sunil. I was privileged enough to go to Downing Street and to be involved in. I met the Chancellor to talk about the Northern Powerhouse, what I felt as a Northern businessman, and my concern was always that I felt it was important that this was not going to be just a Manchester and Leeds powerhouse, and that other northern towns were very important also, and that we should take into account the ability to enhance the economy. Town centres are changing all the time. We live in an age whereby we kind of see less independent shops, perhaps more Tesco Expresses and more internet shopping than there used to be. My belief is that there should have been long ago a relaxation on business rates. I think business rates were counterproductive to people starting up businesses and restarting town centres, and to try and reignite town centres. I think that they are very, very important, that there are independent shops in it, rather than having empty shops. Even give tax breaks if somebody can come up with a credible business plan, or even be given guidance as to this is how you run your business, this is how you manage your finances from the beginning stating the obvious, of course, the ins have to be more than the outs. You have to have a financial model. That has to be in tablets of stone. You have to stick to it. And if you do that, and if you work hard, and if you promote your business on social media, this is how you do that. I think there are things we can do better as a country to encourage new startups. That's what's needed, particularly in the north of England. Another bugbear of mine is transport, and the town of Fleetwood. We don't even have a train station, and we are, I think, the only football club in the English Football League without a train station. The road infrastructure is quite simply awful. So why would anybody look to open a business in Fleetwood with the transport links being as poor as what they are? That is really, really frustrating. I'm not convinced that HS2 is the silver bullet, really, because my personal view is it's very, very expensive. We're going through unprecedented times that are enormously expensive. And does it really matter if it takes 1 hour 10 or 2 hours to get from Manchester to London? To me, we've managed to secure a lot of traditional Labour votes in the north of England. And what we should be doing is we should be engaging with those communities, and we should be reigniting those economies. We should be listening to the residents and doing all we can to retain their votes. And if we can do that, then I think that's far more important than HS2. That's my personal view, and I don't think it's that difficult to do. I've encountered when I've started my business in South Africa, the government's really, really helpful to starting businesses out there. I don't think we are as helpful as what we could be in this country. I think there's lessons to be learned to assist entrepreneurs and do all we can to ensure they don't fail. And if we can do that in the north, the south, the east, or the west, then I think the country and its economy can be so much better.
Yeah, you touched on South Africa, and you expanded your team and business into that country. And of course, for us, we're a bit biased with the Commonwealth and South Africa being a Commonwealth country. How was that experience for you?
It's been fascinating. It's been a wonderful adventure, and it's been successful. It really has. I mean, one of the challenges I have is I've got a very small population where I'm based. I'm a peninsula, the north, east, west. We're surrounded by the sea, so I don't really have the kind of skill set that I require on tap if I am to grow. And by outsourcing some work to South Africa, that has enabled me to employ more people in the northwest of England, because the skill set, the call center culture that I require is readily available on tap. I've had enormous help from the British consulate out there, and probably the biggest lesson I've learned is I expected when I went out there to not receive any assistance from the South African government or from the British consulate. And I got stuck in, I did things on my own, and I made mistakes. I made assumptions that things would be the same as they are in the UK. Now, around a year ago, when I did engage with the British consulate, they were great because they signposted me towards various different organisations, the South African DTI, a company called Wesgrow, which is for growth in the Western Cape of Africa. And these guys, nothing is too much trouble. If you're an international investor, there is a government directive to encourage international investment, whereby you're creating jobs, and they will sit down with the likes of me or any international investor, and they will talk to you about how you can be successful by starting a business in their particular country. So I wish I'd done that earlier, but I also think it's something that if people have got a serious idea, and if people are looking to start a business in this country, and with the appalling redundancies that we've encountered since the outbreak of COVID, when people are looking to start a business, I really think that help should be on hand to do all we can to make sure that those businesses are a success.
In terms of South Africa, it's been seems like a success for you. Is that something you'd be looking to explore further in terms of maybe other countries, Commonwealth countries, coming up in the future? Obviously, it's very hard now, right now in terms of COVID, but once we start to move past this virus and this stage, is that something that you'd potentially envisage doing more work with?
I think definitely yes. My thoughts are that the world seems smaller when you travel regularly. When you're a kid, it's a long way to London, but South Africa, a 12-hour flight, I'm quite used to it now, and it's quite standard practice. And I love visiting different countries. I think there's an abundance of opportunities, particularly with the Commonwealth. And as I say, it's refreshing to know that help is on hand. And the one bit of constructive criticism I could give really is that perhaps we should be more. We should advertise more that help is available out in Commonwealth countries, and we should do all we can to promote reciprocal business between the Commonwealth moving forwards. And I didn't know it was available, but and there's probably people in a similar situation. So it's my belief that we should promote that assistance is actually out there.
Well, I'm going to move to a couple of questions we've had from the audience. One from Harry in Maidenhead. He's moved back onto the football topic. His question is, how can big clubs help grassroots football teams like yourselves, which he believes is the lifeblood of local economy?
I think there's lots of ways, and a really good question. What I would say is there's some easy wins here. And I spoke before about the development of players. Now, the Premier League clubs need to be able to send their players out to earn their stripes, to develop them, and to create the stars of the future. And whether it be Tammy Abraham or whether it be Jamie Vardy or whoever it will be, they've all been out in the Football League. I think that what should happen is the Premier League, given that these clubs are not exactly short of money, let's be honest, they should loan those players out for free, and they should develop relationships with EFL clubs. They shouldn't be charging them. They should be working with them. And there should be a more collective view across football whereby, okay, we may be opponents on occasions for 90 minutes, but we all work in the same sector. We create the same challenges. We should share what is best practice. We should share what works for one and what may be a problem for somebody else, to avoid any unnecessary complications and to enhance best practice. I just think that we should forget about all being rivals, and we should look at the best interests of football. I've got huge respect for grassroots and for amateur football, semi-pro football, because that's the level that Fleetwood comes from. And there's some fantastic people out there that, there's guys who are the owners who, what you will find is they'll be sweeping the dressing rooms at the end of the game. They'll be making the referee a cup of tea at half time, and opening up and putting funds in that they can probably ill afford. And those kind of community clubs, again, are hugely important. And just a slither of money from the Premier League, which instead of a player maybe getting £300,000 a week, he might get £280,000 a week. I don't think will harm him particularly. But if we could redistribute some of those funds to grassroots, to amateur, to semi-pro, then it would make all the difference. It really would.
It's a great point. You look at even Max Kilman at Wolves, who played for Maidenhead, which is where I live. He played for Maidenhead United, and Wolves have signed him now, and he's playing. He's played pretty much every game this year for Premier League. So it's a really good question. And there's a great example with Chelsea, and they have the Dutch team. I think Vitesse, where they loan. Pretty much their whole team is Chelsea's loaning, and there's no reason why that couldn't potentially be an English club. We've had another really interesting question from Lucas Foy. He's written in, do you believe that the reduced energy consumption in the business sector due to COVID-19 will become a political argument to renationalize? And if so, in the next election, it will become a powerful political point due to loss of jobs in the private sector due to COVID-19?
Well, my belief is I don't think nationalisation works. I think we need to be able to give the public competition. I think it drives the bar up of standards. I think that constantly the offers are going to be better if we have freedom of choice, if we have deregulation. I would be very surprised if nationalisation. I think Mr. Corbyn, that was one of his key points to nationalise as many things as possible, and he took a pasting. I think inevitably, my view is what will happen is the Labour Party will move more to the right, which isn't difficult given where they were, I think that COVID is a separate challenge entirely, and if we'd been nationalised, if the sector had been private, this is still going to be an enormous challenge, and there'd still be surplus from the generators, and I think it's a moot point really, but an interesting one nonetheless. So thank you for that, Lucas.
And another one from Mark. He's wondering if you have any insights into how footballers approach politics, as fortunately our sport is not politicized in this country.
Well, I'm not aware of any footballers who've come out. I'm just trying to think now, who've ever actually posted their allegiance to the Conservative Party. Can we think of anybody? I'm not sure. There's one or two that have posted their allegiance to the Labour Party, I think, mainly from a certain city not a million miles away from me. It's footballers tend to stay out of politics, is my view. I think they don't want to be seen as divisive. My intention, and there's certainly no apologies from me whatsoever. I want what's best for my community, and hand on heart, as I said before, I know a Conservative government is far better for the town of Fleetwood, and I believe for the entire country. Therefore, I make no apologies for promoting the Conservative Party. But footballers tend to not be quite as opinionated as football club owners, shall we say.
I think the only one I can think of is Sol Campbell. I know Sol Campbell came out as a Conservative, but that was also in relation to last election. So other than that, I can't think of any, especially on the blue side. I think a few have probably come on the on Labour side, but I can't think of any on the Conservative side.
No.
But finally, one of our last questions. It's on the economy. One of our regular talking points on all these webinars, how much COVID-19 is going to affect the economy, and we've had different people say different things about being very pro lockdown. Some people being on the flip side. What's your general stance on how the government's doing with COVID-19, and whether what you potentially foresee for the long term of this country and going forward in terms of businesses? Should we continue with lockdowns?
Personally, I feel that the second lockdown is not necessary, and I think it will have far-reaching consequences for the business and for economy. Again, my view is that shielding the vulnerable feels like a far better thing to do. I think there are two different stages to the financial pain that we're going to feel. One is the here and now, whereby can businesses ride out this storm? The second is I'm concerned as to the consequences of how we are going to pay for all of the furlough and the CBILS and the other measures that the Treasury have made available to keep the wheels turning within the economy. So hugely concerning. I was very, very disappointed when I found out we're going into a lockdown situation again. That said, I'm not party to the medical situation and the advice that is being given by the professors. The last thing we want to see is mortality, because that's as bad as it possibly gets. But I just want to see the economy starting up again. It feels to me like we've worked incredibly hard for decades to deliver a very good standard of living. I'm 50 years old now, and 20, 30, 40 years ago, for any of the younger viewers, the quality of life was nothing like what we experience today. It really, really wasn't. So we've worked very, very hard. I'd like to see things get better still. And my concern is for the longer the lockdown goes, the deeper the hole is we have to dig ourselves out of. But we must be guided by the powers that be there, and hopefully we all hope and pray we get back to some form of normality.
Well, that concludes our webinar today. I want to say a huge thank you for everyone who's tuned in, but in particular to Andy who's taken time out of his busy schedule today and shared some really insightful information. It's refreshing to actually hear a successful businessman on our platform and who's actually put in practice to a lot of the sort of conservative policies and someone who can actually talk about some of the stuff that we often hear from politicians about how they're trying to help businesses, and is an example of someone who actually has been successful in his work. So thank you for your time, Andy, and yeah, it's been great talking to you today.
A pleasure. Thank you for everyone who's tuned in. I'm truly honoured, and good luck to everyone. Let's hope the good times return soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.